Srimati Ramanujaya Namaha. Sri Sailesha Dayapatram Dibhaktyadi Gudharnabam Yatindra Pravanam Vande Ramyaja Mataram Munim Lakshminada Samarambham Nathayam Unamadhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantham Vande Guru Parambaram Yonityam Achyutapadam Bhujayukma Rukma Vyamohatastathitarani Trinayamene Asmadgurur Bhagavadosya Dhaekasantoho Ramanujasya Charanau Sharanam Pravatye Mata Pita Yuvadayas Dhanaya Vibhudihi Sarvam Yadeva Niyamena Matanvayanam Atyasya Nakhulapader Vakulaviramam Srimattadangri Yogalam Pranamami Mudhnam Bodham Sarascha Magadahvaya Bhattanada Sri Bhaktisara Kulasekhara Yogi Vahan Bhaktangri Renu Parakala Yatintara Mishran Srimat Parangosamanim Pranatosmi Nityam. Namaskaram to all. On this auspicious day of Navaratri celebration, Adiyen, with the fullest anugraham of Shri Afpadi, Shri Narayanan, and Tayar Priyavaratiyar, Shri Mahalakshmi Tayar, with the anugrahams of both of them, Adiyen is blessed here to be with all of the Adiyas, to share the glories of the 108 Divyadesam of Emperuman Shri Narayanan. Talking about temples in India, we are coming from the culture of Hindu culture. Especially in India, temples are part of the culture. And knowing about the history of the temples and the importance of the temples, it's not only for this generation important, it's also for our generation important not to forget about, and it is our responsibility to take it to the next generation. Temples are part and parcel of our culture when we were young. Adiyen is talking about the generation of Adiyen's age, maybe plus or minus 10 years. When we were in our childhood, it's like a routine in our life, like taking a bath in the morning or taking a breakfast in the morning. Going to temple was part of a culture, part of a routine, and we never questioned so much. There could be some exceptions, but in general, by and large, in our childhood, we were brought up in such a way that visiting to a temple on a daily basis is a routine for every kid. And that was a luxury that we had in our childhood. But considering that there are many kids that who may be listening to this as a story or to gather knowledge about temples in India and about the 108 Divyadesams of Emperuman, they may have the question about, why do we have to go to temples? Why can't I pray the God who is present, omnipresent everywhere? Emperuman is omnipresent everywhere. And why should we go to temples? What is the purpose of going to temple? These type of questions, this generation, especially when we are outside India, and even in this today's world, even within India, Adiyen can see that one. That routine is not there with the kids. It's not their problem. It is our responsibility to clarify their doubts and make them understand the importance of temples. So why do we have to go to temples? First of all, even before we go and see about these 108 temples during these days of this Navaratri celebration, Adiyen would like to take this small time as an introduction and also to clarify few of the doubts to my basic knowledge, whatever I could clarify. Temples, why do we have to go to temples? We have God everywhere, so we can pray here at home. Yes, we can do. There's nothing wrong. Emperuman is present everywhere, God is present everywhere, and you can have within yourself, God is present and one can pray. But the reason for that is that it's like going to school. Why do you go to school and learn education? In this COVID time, we do a lot of remote learning. Even then, going to a school for an environment where it gives other students coming together, a teacher being there, an environment is being created, which is a positive energy for learning, is what a school gives. The same way, a temple is a place where our Purvacharyas, it can be it can be Saivism or Vaishnavism, the Purvacharyas have gone into many temples and their footsteps are there today. And if you have to get the blessings and the positive energy of those acharyas, the temples are the places where they visited. And this is in the history of all their poems, where all they have visited. So if you have to get those positive energy, going to a place and praying the God gives a much more positivity in your praying. And temples in that aspect gives those culture of making the discipline and going there, visiting every day, like going to a school. And that is the reason why in the ancient days, many temples were built and we go there and pray, and a lot of chanting happens there together. When you hear that one, there are many positivity that is getting created within you. And when you go to a temple and come back, you feel such a greatness within yourself. And that's one of the reasons. It is a respect to our Purvacharyas, Alvars, who have visited their footsteps. They have made their footsteps into those temples, and going there, we get their own anugrahams. Where else we will go and get those anugrahams of those acharyas? And those are the temples where they have visited, and those footsteps we can follow. And that's the one of the reason that we still go to temples and go and pray God there. The next question immediately comes, so as we are going to the topic of that, this discussion is about 108 Divyadesam of Emperuman Shri Narayanan, which is in the Sri Vaishnavism. It is one of the sacred thing, 108 temples physically. Being in India and able to visit those temples is such an importance. When there are thousands of temples for Sri Narayanan, even within India, you can see there are so many temples in India. Why this 108 temples that we are talking about? What is so special about those 108 temples? It's the next question that comes to our mind. These are the temples, the 10 Alvars in Sri Vaishnavism. Normally they had 12 in name. We always tell about as 10 Alvars, as 2 of the Alvars are together, always we say. And these Alvars in the Nalayira Divya Prabandham, we call it 4000 Divya Prabandham, the poems praising Emperuman, and not only praising the Paratvam of Emperuman, it is also talking about so many of the places in the temples where Emperuman is there. So it shows that from their poems that they have visited those places, because they praise not only about Emperuman, equally they are also praising the places where the Emperuman, because that's the bhakti that they have got to the level that they even went to those places, because that's how they had a great bhakti towards Emperuman. So those places which have been referred in the Nalayira Divya Prabandham by Alvars are termed as these 108 temples. Out of all these 1,000 temples, or several thousands temples of Emperuman Sriman Narayanan, these temples, which are, we call it out as a Mangala Sasanam by Alvars. That means they have praised these temples. That means they have gone into that places. Their footsteps are there into those temples. It is from south of India up to north of India. There are several temples. We are talking about several thousand years back, 5,000 years back. There are no convenient way to travel to those places. Alvars have traveled from south to north into those temples, and they have made their footsteps. So there must be a big reason for that. And now to get those anugrahams of those Alvars into those temples which they have praised in the poems of Divya Prabandham, and that's so special about the 108 Divyadeshangal, what we call it out in Sri Vaishnavism. That's why out of all the temples of Sriman Narayanan, these 108 temples, or So it gets a special notice and it gets a speciality in our praying. And we are going to learn about, within these 9 or 10 days, we may not be able to learn all the temples, 108 temples. Of course, Adian would take some of the important temples, and we can visit all those temples in India. 106 temples out of the 108 temples are physically reachable temples for us. We will see more about that when we are seeing the temples and which temples you can visit and which temples we cannot visit. 106 temples are in India, and we can visit also physically. And that is one of the advantage. What else we can get today? Very conveniently, we can do a travel and visit when Alvars have made their efforts several thousand years back when those facilities were not there. So that is the importance. That's why it's very important in Vaishnavism about, for Sri Vaishnavites, these 108 temples are like Sri Vaikuntham. This is in the earth. We go to those temples and then pray Sriman Narayanan there, along with Tayar. The next question comes to mind. Okay, temples are fine. So these 108 temples are so special. These are great. But what is the importance of the Vigraha Rupam in which Sriman Narayanan is there? So we go there in a structured form. We pray Sriman Narayanan in those temples. It's a very important concept in Vaishnavism. Emperuman Sriman Narayanan Shriyapadi, Sriman Narayanan, he is in 5 forms. The first form where he is called Para. Para. This is like being present in Sri Vaikuntham. Para Rupam we call. And the way in which he is present in the Vedas, described in the Vedas, and how he is in Sri Vaikuntham along with Tayar, and where all the Nityatmas and Muktatmas are doing Kainkaryam to Emperuman there. And that is a place we call it out as a Moksham. And this is the ultimate happiness, a permanent Kainkaryam place to Emperuman. And you do not have a rebirth afterwards when you reach to this place. The form in which Emperuman lies there is called Pararupam. And we can only see that one when you reach to Moksham. So there is no opportunity to pray that form of Sriman Narayanan in that one. Even for other devas, even if it is Brahma, Shiva, or any other form of devas, the Sri Vaikuntham is like a one-way path. Going there is possible, but you cannot again come back out of Sri Vaikuntham. So for devas or for other Varuna or Indra who wants to visit Sriman Narayana, there must be a place. Every day they come there with their problems to get resolved. And so if they have to go and meet Sriman Narayana, there is a second form Sriman Narayana takes, which is called as Vyuha Rupam. The Vyuha Rupam is a Tirupar Kadal, where he is lying along with Mahalakshmi Tayar in Tirupar Kadal. We call it out as the Holy Sea. And there, these devas can visit. Any type of the devas who are in the other world, they could go and visit. And that is a place even for the humans who are there, this type of an Atma cannot go and we cannot pray there. So we don't have an opportunity to go to those type of a place. So we don't have an opportunity even for Pararupam as well as for Vyuha Rupam. The third form Emperuman took in this world is called Vibhava Rupam. Vibhava is the form that he took 10 avatars. The 9 avatars already he took in this Bharatadesham. He took several forms, the avatars, and one of the couple of them were even the human forms, which like Rama or Krishna. In those yukams, we are in Kali Yukam, and in those yukams, we didn't have the opportunity to live together with Rama or Krishna. So many of these Atmas who are there in this universe didn't have the opportunity to even have that together with Rama or Krishna and being together. So we didn't see those Vibhava Rupam. Today, in the form of those Archavatarams. In the temples, we see Rama and Krishna, but we were not there in the Dwapara Yugam to see Krishna. We are in this Kali Yugam. And that is one of the reason Emperor, he is so kind, he is so mercy to us. And he wanted to show his form to even the Atmas, which are daily onto this one. The Muktatma and the Muktatma and the Nityatma has got the opportunity to do that in the Sri Vaikuntham, but the Atmas here, the Baddhatma, we call it out. And they should have also an opportunity to see the form of Emperuman. And for that reason, he took the fourth form, which is called Archa. Archa is the way in which the structured form in the temples is called Archarupam. The fifth form, which is within the Atma itself, within one itself, he is there called as Antaryami, and which is also something that we cannot see by our eyes. So the only form that we can go and pray and see is the Archavataram. That's why it's very important that going to these temples, we are not such type of a saints who can do a bhakti yoga, jnana yoga. Without a structure, they are able to get the true bhakti. There were saints, in rishis, they were doing that. But for us into this universe, with so much of the distraction, we need something of that structure to make our bhakti true. And that form helps the Vigraha Rupam. And that is what we call it out as the Archa Rupam in temples. And that's the form that in all the temples you will see it out as Emperuman, as Rama, Krishna, Vishnu, Ranganatha. So there are so many forms that you can see it out so that we can enjoy the different forms of Emperuman Sriman Narayanan. That is the main background of the temples and the 108 Divyadeshams, why it is so important, and also what is the different forms Lord Vishnu has taken. And one of the important form is the Archavataram, which is the only one which in this world, until we have life here, until we reach moksham, that is the only way by which you can realize, at least to see a structure and pray Emperuman. And that's so important for us to understand why temples, going to temples and then making this structured form of a praying is so important for us. Now coming back to the 108 Divyadesam temples, they are structured into a geographical location. In the past, even though these temples have been maybe it was formed by its own or it was created by some people, they were developed and built by our kings, Cholas, Pandyas, Cheras. These people have built and they made these temples bigger, and they are still, we are able to enjoy those temples after several years of this inception of these temples because of the Kainkariam these kings have made. And that's the reason the 108 Divyadeshams have been grouped. Even today, we call it out as Cholanadu temples. We call Cholanadu is the Chola kings who built. So there is an area where in and around that kings where Cholas were ruling, which is around Trichy, Urayur, Tanjavur, these type of places. There are around 40 temples in and around. We call it out as the Cholanadu temples. Pandyanadu, which is based out into the Madurai and in and around, is 18 Divyadeshangal. And Malaynadu, which is all Malay temples, which including Tirumalai and so on, which is 13 Divyadeshangal. Nadunadu, 2 Divyadeshangal. Tondainadu, 22 Divyadeshangal. Vadanadu, which is the north of India, which is 12 Divyadeshangal. And Tirunadu is a Sri Vaikuntham Sri, 1 Divyadesham. This way, the 108 temples are organized by the areas, and it is also named by those kings who developed those. And today we can go there into all of these places except 2, which is what Tirupparkadal and Sri Vaikuntham, which we cannot go. But all other 106 temples we have been blessed to visit physically today, and many of the adhyars might have already visited those temples a lot, but it is still an opportunity to go and visit there and get the pure anugrahams of Alvars. The Mangalasasanam done by Alvars of these are very great. In the Nalayira Divya Prabandham, there are several poems that they have, the Pasurams that they have sung with the places where Emperuman is like. Equally to the Paratvam of Emperuman, Alvars looked the places where Emperuman is there, because they also get the equal importance. They are blessed to be there by the Emperuman, because he has chosen those places to be there. And that's how Alvars looked at those places, because they have been blessed by Emperuman. And that's why the importance of those 108 Divyadeshams are coming. The way and the last grouping of this, once this geographical grouping of 108 is also equally important, and also the form, how these temples have been formed. There are three classifications that we call it out on the 108 temples, because when you are creating a temple, we call it out as pratishtai. In Tamil, we call it out as a pratishtai. It could be a Sanskrit word also. The pratishtai is done by humans. These days, you see a lot of temples where we go and build one temple, and then you do a pratishtai of Emperuman or another vigraham there. So this type of human created, human pratishtai temples, they are called as manusham, the classification. Then there is also the second one, which is also there, which is called as arusham, which is created by devas. Like it could be any of the devas, not the humans here. It could be Brahma, it could be Indra, Varuna, whoever has created, and they have made the pratishtai of those temples, and that is called as arusham. Then there is a third classification of the temple, which is called Swayam Bhaktam. Swayam Bhaktam is the one which Emperuman himself has chosen to be there. There is nobody else have done the pratishtai of those temples. And there are 8 temples, which out of this 108 Divyadesams, it is called Swayam Bhakta Kshetram. And this is very important. Swayam Bhakta Kshetram, Emperuman himself has chosen that place and being there. So you could also see that one, there are temples which are belonging to these classifications. And then we will see it out when we look at each of those temples, whether they are Swayam Bhakta Kshetram or it is Arusham or a Manusham temples, and these type of classifications. So these are few fundamentals again I wanted to share before we go and know about each of those temples, or however temples, how many ever temples that we could cover in those 10 days. Again would try to cover and share those knowledge. Again, what I again have learned from the acharyas or people like Sri Velukudi Krishnan, who gives a great upanyasam on those Divyadeshams. If you go to the YouTube, he gives in a very glimpse of 7 to 10 minutes great information about each of those Divyadeshams. And there are books about in the internets about Divyadeshams. So Adiyan has learned only from those acharyas or gurus, whatever the knowledge that they have given. Adiyan would try to share that as much in this period of this Navaratri and share with you all. We will start with the temples from the next part. Srimate Ramanujaya Namaha. ஆழ்வார்கள் திருவடிகளே சரணம், எம்பெருமானார் திருவடிகளே சரணம், ஜீயர் திருவடிகளே சரணம், ஆச்சாரியன் சுவாமி திருவடிகளே சரணம்.